Thank you everybody for coming. This will be my first presentation after 2 years, so I hope my voice can hold out for 1 hour.
Okay.
We won't be here for 1 hour. We'll get you to the evening festivities early if you ask good questions. So, who am I? I'm Stuart Hardwick. I'm a Write as a Future winner. I write science fiction, mostly in fantasy. I'm a regular in Analog magazine. And significantly for tonight's presentation is I'm a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for many, many years. In fact, for a while I shared a table with John Carmack, who was one of the founders of id Software that gave the world the video games Doom and Quake. You may have heard of them. He used to test that on my computer. I'm going to talk to you about 3 things tonight. The best way to plan a novel, the best way to plan a software application, and the best way to find hidden treasure. And they're all the same. So I'm going to start by telling you a story. It was a dark and stormy night when I sat down to write the great American novel. What did I see?
Yes.
The blank screen of doom, the taunting of the flashing cursor. But I know how to deal with this. My 7th grade language arts teacher, Mrs. Walsh, I think her name was, she told us she needed an outline. So, okay, that's somewhere I've got a, okay, that's good. Now, well, as I recall, Mrs. Walsh gave us research papers. Outlines are great for research papers. You do your research, you come up with some topics you want to talk about, throw them on a piece of paper, move them around, shuffle them, filter them, put them in a hierarchy, and you've got an outline. You sit down and you write the outline. I did a graduate certificate at UC Berkeley. I wrote 4 essays in an hour on paper that way. It works great. But we're trying to write a novel. It's this whole complex animal with multiple plots, and you're inventing it, and there's research, but that's not really what it's all about. So what do you put on the outline? Well, the conventional answer is brainstorming, right? To come up with ideas. And you all remember the rules. You want to create as many ideas as possible, quantity over quality. You want to defer criticism, defer filtering. You want to embrace crazy ideas, irrational ideas, ideas you know won't work, that doesn't count. Later you'll modify them, combine them. Great. Brainstorming is a great tool, there's no question about it. It is one of the tools that you need to write a novel. But I'm looking for the tool to get from the idea for a novel to a plan for a novel. Basically an outline. I know some of you don't want to say the word outline because that's an evil thing, and I can understand why you think that, but you need a plan, right? Yeah. Well, some people say the solution is mind mapping, or its closely related cousin, which may be the same thing, concept mapping, which is basically brainstorming with pictures. And you put pictures on your paper, you put notes on your paper, you draw arrows to show connections. Great. Let's give that a try. I don't know, that looks kind of familiar. I actually did give this a try. There are a lot of people who promote mind mapping software as the solution to planning a novel. Usually they suggest kind of having branches. So you have one branch to explore your characters, another branch to explore your plot, another branch to explore your world building. And it seems logical, it seems like it should work. But in my experience, I played with some of the free tools for mind mapping, I played with some of the commercial tools for mind mapping, and I came to the conclusion that this is a recipe for spending a lot of time and potentially a fair amount of money using a tool that's made for a business application and trying to shoehorn it into what I want, and I come back to this, the blank screen. So I need something a little better than that. Now, one thing that does work, we probably all used it, is called bookending. Bookending is where if you know your starting scene, you know where your characters are starting, and you know where you'd like them to end up, then you just fill in the gap between them, right? This works really well for short stories. I use it all the time for short stories. In fact, it's so effective that this is basically the approach that I used for my first novel. I had the first scene and the last scene and a few scenes in between, and I started writing. And I'd sit on the bus riding home from work every day, and I'd type away, and every once in a while, I'd stop and kind of rejigger, and I'd fill in some more scenes, and fill in some more scenes, and delete some scenes. I don't like deleting scenes, that's a bad thing. That means I just wasted time. It works. I wrote a novel that people didn't hate. Some people liked it enough to at least claim to have liked it. But I wrote about 320,000 words to produce a 96,000 word novel. That is probably not the approach that I would say. It's a nice approach. You're building your story like puzzle pieces. But for long stories like novels, you need a little more structure than this. I need a little more structure. I need something that gives me more than just a starting point. I need something that gives me enough structure that I can sit down and write and focus on crafting words and not sit down at my computer when I've got the kids to sleep and the dogs aren't barking and the UPS truck isn't at the door and I've got my mind in that creative mind space and I've got to think what comes next. I don't want that. I want to have some kind of a coherent, overarching plan for the novel, whether it's an outline or call it what you want. So, I felt like all the tools are there. They're kind of out of reach. They're not in the right form. Brainstorming is a great way of coming up with ideas. Outlining is a great way of organizing ideas. But every time I looked at anybody's writing advice on how to plan a novel, I saw a lot of discussion about breaking the novel down into parts. I didn't see a lot of practical advice on how to build the parts. So I started reading books on the subject. I'm sure you've all seen this diagram before, some version of it. I read books like with titles like Saving the Cat, Story Engineering, great book. I studied story beats, beat sheets, the snowflake method, pitch sheet curves, things like that. Great stuff. It really makes you think. And I always felt inspired, but I always felt disappointed. None of these were the tools that I was looking for to help me bridge that gap between the idea for a novel and a coherent plan for what I'm going to write. They also had the same failing. None of them contained this. This is what in software engineering is called stepwise refinement. This goes back to like 1970, when I guess software engineers were going through a similar problem. Stepwise refinement just means you start with kind of a vague description of what you're trying to do, and you refine it, and you refine it, and you refine it. In the case of computer programs, you imagine maybe your business user gives you an English description of some problem they want to solve. And you convert that into pseudocode, which is an English description of the kind of steps a computer would take to solve that problem. Great. You can't write a computer program that way. So you refine it. And you figure out you need a subroutine here, and a subroutine there, and a subroutine there, and then you go do the same thing to each one of those. And eventually, you have steps that you can implement in whatever language you're using, be it Pascal or Java or C#, whatever. I need something like this for writing. None of these tools give this to me. Even, story engineering, I was really excited because it sounded like this, right? But it wasn't really. It was just another discussion of story structure derived from Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which was a literary analysis tool, not a craft tool to begin with. And most of the writing guidance based on that that's come out in the decades since seems to be geared toward writing screenplays for the American movie market, where timing is very critical. And so as a novelist, they end up seeing kind of like a straitjacket. They're too prescriptive. And they don't have enough support for the sidetracking and the experimentation and exploration. And that's why we have this big debate between fencers and plotters, right? What I want is a tool that does all of it. I want to brainstorm. I want to have an iterative process where I have structure, I winnow my ideas down, I develop new ideas, I refine them, and I keep doing that until I have an outline. And then I can write. And the outline's not, not the Bible, but at least I know what my story is going to be. And then as I write to that outline, I can make changes. That's what I'm looking for. And I realized I knew exactly what that needed to look like. This is me at the Rise of the Future Daylight in Hollywood. But this is me in the midst of telling a different story. And that story is this.
As I recall, when I was a little kid, I almost stepped on a snake, and I called my mother, and she came running, and she almost stepped on it too. The snake survived, don't worry, but later, she told me, son, when you see a snake, don't yell mommy, mommy, yell snake.
Whenever I tell that story, somebody laughs. But nobody ever asks, why did you almost step on the snake? The reason is because when I was a kid, we used to go treasure hunting. My dad was in the military. When he came home, we needed something to do as a family. And we lived in South Dakota. And we traipsed all over the Badlands, all over the prairies, through ghost towns, old mines, mine claims, looking for bottles, insulators, gold dust, dinosaur bones, and we found all of them. And how did my parents do that with small children in tow in the days before cell phones and GPS? U.S. Geologic Service survey maps. These maps were not like Google Earth. They were not created from satellites. They were created by actual people who went out in the field with survey instruments. And they surveyed the entire United States on some schedule. I don't know what it was. And they told you not just where the cities and roads were so you could plan your route. They told you the topography, the lay of the land. So my mother could make sure we weren't going any good, that a 3-year-old wearing cowboy boots who might be riding on our hip at any given moment wouldn't be able to go. But better than that, they included all kinds of notations about what the surveyors had found in the landscape. Abandoned towns, abandoned railroad tracks, abandoned mines, the kind of things that treasure hunters want to investigate. Houses that had been present 2 surveys ago, but in the most recent survey had rotted into the landscape. Well, you're going to bring the metal detector, right? With features like that and annotations from my mother's research, we had waypoints. We knew where to go on the map where we wouldn't get lost, we wouldn't run out of food, we wouldn't run out of fuel, which was a problem in South Dakota you had to worry about. But we could go off and explore what we found. Go off and explore, and if it was interesting, stay there, come back another day. If we got lost, we'd go back to our waypoints, continue on our way. This was the tool I was looking for, story topography. You have plot progressing in one direction along some structure, be what it may. It can be based on Joseph Campbell's The Hero Journey, what have you. And that provides waypoints. You know, these conceptual story events need to happen in roughly this sequence, at roughly these times. But don't get hung up on the times, like most of these folks do. Then you brainstorm on these conceptual story events to see what events your story needs to put in that place. And this is the problem with outlining and brainstorming, right? Brainstorming is a great tool if I say, hey, I have characters in this situation and I need to know what happens next. I need to know, how does Sarah get out of jail? How does the Terminator get through the wall? What does my hero encounter that makes him proud? Brainstorming is the right solution there, right? It's just not the right tool for the big picture. So the waypoints provide the big picture, the brainstorming provides the food for refinement, and refinement helps you go from the conceptual story event down to a specific event for your story. So Here's an example. This is just a linear structure, 3-act structure. The plot progresses this way. So these are the conceptual story events: the inciting incident, the pinch points, the midpoint, the climax. You brainstorm what could be, but isn't necessarily, a story-specific version of each one of those, and then you explore. And if you need to go do some exploratory writing, you can go do some exploratory writing, come back and decide, okay, maybe Harry's not going to go to Hogwarts in the first chapter. Maybe something else needs to happen. We'll put that in the dog pound, and we'll come back to it. And you go write that other thing, and you decide, no, really, we need to get Harry to Hogwarts. And so you figure out how to do that, and you realize, oh, let's have the whole thing about platform 9 3/4, and you put that in there, and that's great. But you still have this overarching plot going from left to right to keep you on course. As you come down and branch and have your false turns and blind alleys in your exploration, you can always go back and know your bearings. You can do it with the hero's journey, the cyclical plot. Same thing. In this case, the plot goes around in a circle. The refinement goes from the center out. Why from the center out? Because in the center you only have the conceptual story events. There's a few of those. And on the outside you're going to have a whole bunch of specific your story events. Now I'm not the first person to think of this. I may be the first person to give it a name. You can absolutely do this on a big wall. You can do it on a big wall of butcher paper. You can do it on a big artist's portfolio, notebook, whatever works for you. And, good for you. Personally, I'm not into the whole sliding pieces of paper around. I want something that is versionable, portable, shareable, searchable. I want something, if possible, that at the end of the process will spit out an outline or maybe a Scrivener project. We talked in the last panel I was in about Scrivener having too many tools that people don't use. And I think that's because Scrivener, and I love Scrivener, I use it all the time. I think Scrivener was trying to do some of what I'm trying to do here, but it's trying to do it using tools that people have had success with in the real world, cram them onto a computer, like putting cards on a corkboard. I personally find the corkboard in Scrivener a complete waste of time. I would need a computer screen the size of one of these walls for that to be of use, which is why people put notes up on walls, right? So, having gotten to this point and realized what the process is, the story of topography, I realized that nobody's written this tool. And so I decided to answer the call. I'm a software developer. I will write the tool. And this is what it looks like. It's called Story Design Studio. And this is an example of one of those maps that I was just looking at. This is the hero's journey. Starts here, goes around. I know you can't read it, but you can zoom in if you're actually looking at it. It has pre-filled out a set of conceptual story events. And once on this point, you start putting nodes on it. It's like a mind mapping tool. You put them on nodes, say, I want to do this. And then you refine that node. And you put vague nodes close to the center, and then you refine them out. And as you go outward, you have more and more space. Right now I have a linear map and I have a cyclical map. We could have any that we want to have. Any structure you can conceive of, you could have one like going around the edge of Texas. It doesn't make any difference. The point is, you have plot progressing in one direction and refinement of story progressing at right angles to it. I actually have a copy of the program running on this computer. So I can show you and play around with it a little bit if you like. And just to let you know, This is still in development. The reason I wanted to present it here is to see what interest you guys all have in it. I'm going to be calling for beta testers sometime in the next few months. But yeah, it works. Let me show you just a couple of things. I'm going to fit the map to the screen. There we go. So see, we can zoom in and we can drag it around. And this has all the features that I had envisioned, and of course I'm thinking of more all the time, which is a problem in of itself. But like a good graphics program, it has layers. So I can probably show you that. So this blue text over here is actually an instruction layer to help a new user use this. So I can go over and turn that. Oh, here we go, user guide. I can turn that off, get it out of there. And then you can have as many more layers as you want. So you can have one layer for each character, one layer for each subplot. You can give your nodes keywords and categories, and then you can search on those keywords and categories, and then you can do things too. So for example, you could say, across all layers, show me all nodes that have Harry Potter mentioned.